Hello, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be making 3 tops inspired by tops from Princess Polly, Reformation, and Blue Pie. To start off, the first top is going to be inspired by this front lace top from Princess Polly that retails for $42. For the materials, I'm going to be needing some fabric and lace. I will put the links of the materials that I use in the description box. I'm going to need 1 back piece, 2 front pieces, 2 sleeves, and 2 rectangles to make the ties at the front. To get started, I'm going to sew the front and the back pieces together by sewing the sides and the top, leaving the front open. After I've attached them, I'm going to pin the bottom of the shirt to make the seam, and I'm going to sew it together with a straight stitch. I sew the seam on the sleeves before folding it in half and sewing the sides together to close it off. After attaching the sleeves, pin the lace in place, sew in place using a straight stitch. I made the straps using the rectangles of fabric, and I sew them in place at the front of the top. For the next top, I'm going to be using this Reformation top as a reference. This top retails for $128. I'm going to be using the rest of the fabric I used from the previous top and elastic. For this top, I'm going to need 2 big rectangles for the body and 2 thin, long rectangles for the straps. First, we're going to sew both of the rectangles together to make one whole piece. Then I'm going to sew the seam at the top, making it wide enough to fit the elastic I'm using through there. To attach the elastic in the middle, I'm going to pin the elastic to both ends and at the middle. I have already cut the elastic to the desired length. Using a straight stitch, I'm going to attach the elastic to the top while pulling on it. Pinning the elastic at the middle and ends helps the gathering be even. After I've attached the elastic, I'm going to feed the other elastic through the top seam, and I'm going to sew the sides of the top together to close it off. The last thing is to make the straps and attaching them. 2 on the front side and 2 on the back side. The next top I'm going to be making is inspired by this top by a Korean brand called Blue Pie that retails for about $41. I'm going to need fabric, twill ribbon, inner facing, and eyelets. For this top, I'm going to be using a lot more pieces of fabric. 2 front pieces and 2 small rectangles to do the details in the front. 1 back piece and 1 rectangle to do the details on the back. 2 sleeves and 2 circles to make the details on the sleeves. I didn't have a pattern for this top. I'm going to be linking down below the references that I used to make the pattern. I had attempted to do this top once before, but I did not take into account the fabric I was going to be using for this seam, so it turned out to be really small. So for the second attempt, I'm going to be using this skirt that I found at a thrift store. This skirt has an inner lining that I'm also going to be using. To start off, I'm going to sew the front and the back pieces together by attaching the sides only. Once they're attached, I'm going to do the seam, and I use an iron just to make it easier. I cut a piece of inner face and I place it on top of the lining and fabric. I pinned it in place and cut around it to get 3 identical rectangles. While it's still pinned, I'm gonna sew 3 of the sides, leaving one of the smaller sides open to flip it around. I'm gonna do this twice to do the details on the front. Now, at the front of the shirt, I'm going to fold the fabric to create a seam, and I'm going to place the rectangle I just finished on the top, leaving the open space to where the sleeve is going to go. I'm going to do the seam at the top and the details on the rectangle at the same time. After it's done, it's supposed to look like this. And then I'm gonna also do the same thing on the back. For the sleeves, I'm gonna sew this C shape all around, leaving a small gap to flip it around. And then I'm gonna attach it to the sleeve. Attach the top to the sleeve and seam the rest of the loose sleeve. I'm going to add elastic to the part of the sleeve that's going to rest on the shoulder to give it the gather effect. And now it's time for the final details. Since I'm going to be adding eyelets to the front, I'm going to be adding inner facing in the inside of the shirt to reinforce it. I cut up a rectangle 4 inches in width and I fold it in half. I'm going to place it in between the lining and the fabric and do the seam. The next thing is to add the eyelets, making sure they're even on both sides. I ended up adding one more eyelet at the top. And finally, the last thing is to add the ribbon. I burned the ends to prevent it from unraveling. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.